Pinup models became a thing around World War II. Though there are many more efficient ways to see nude women nowadays, nothing beats the timeless beauty of pinups. From Marilyn Monroe to Cleo Moore, join Facts First as we explore the most beautiful pinup girls captured in timeless photos. Marilyn Monroe. Of course, most people will think of Marilyn as a famous Hollywood actress. She certainly was, but she was an iconic pinup model first. Marilyn wasn't born with her famous stage name. At her birth, she was known as Norma Jean Mortensen. Before settling on the stage name of Marilyn Monroe, she considered Carol Lind. The name Carol Lind was inspired by Carol Lombard and Jenny Lind. Eventually, Marilyn grew to surpass both of these figures significantly in terms of fame. Though Marilyn went on to become one of the biggest stars of all time, she initially struggled upon first showing up in Hollywood. After signing her first contract with 20th Century Fox, she found herself underutilized. Once the contract was up in the late 40s, Marilyn started focusing more on modeling. This was when she took the relatively new world of pinups by storm. Notably, Marilyn was the seminal Playmate of the Month in the very first issue of Playboy ever published. After finding success as a pinup, Marilyn returned to Hollywood. She became one of the biggest screen stars of the 50s. Tragically, she passed away in the 1960s. Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield almost equaled Marilyn Monroe in popularity, both in the world of pinups and on the big screen. Like Marilyn, Jayne appeared in Playboy. Coincidentally, Jayne also passed away at a tragically young age. Marilyn Monroe's death had come as a result of substance abuse, and it likely could have been avoided. However, Jayne Mansfield's tragic and untimely death was more accidental. She passed away in June of 1967 in a car accident. Bettie Page. The two aforementioned pinup models are some of the first that come to mind when people think of the topic, but Bettie Page has them both beat. Bettie is considered the queen of pinups. She was born in the early 20s in Nashville. She had a decidedly rough childhood. Not only were her parents poor, her father was abusive. When Bettie was only 10, she and her sisters were sent to live in an orphanage due to the fact that their parents could no longer afford to take care of them. Bettie's father later came to take the girls back under his wing. Some might think Bettie and her sisters being saved from the orphanage by their father was a good thing, except he was abusive. Now, living back with her father, Bettie was starting to develop into a young woman. She now found herself the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of her father. The young woman managed to hide the pain of the abuse for the time being. She performed well in high school, receiving straight A's. This opened up the opportunity for the burgeoning young woman to attend a prestigious Nashville college. After college, she tried out a couple of different careers before deciding she wanted to become a Hollywood actress. Bettie moved to Hollywood and began doing everything she could to secure roles. Bettie was willing to do a lot to get a role on the big screen, but she wasn't willing to sleep around. When she received her first screen test, she was devastated to learn she'd only received the role if she was willing to sleep with the producer. This caused Bettie to turn her back on Hollywood. She moved to New York City, and soon she met a man who turned her into a pinup star. She was working out on the beach in New York when a man named Jerry Tibbs spotted her. He was a police officer, but also a member of a nude photography club. He convinced Bettie to pose for his club, and the rest is history. The picture Jerry took of Bettie ended up being published in numerous notable smut publications. This led to the opportunity for Bettie to meet Irving Klaw. Klaw was one of the biggest figures in the pinup industry at the time, but the kind of pinups he produced were out of the ordinary. Irving Klaw became enamored of Bettie Page, and he convinced her to be his newest pinup model. Irving produced BDSM-centric pinups, which were more controversial back in the day than they would be now. Bettie didn't mind working with such niche subject matter. Irving was able to produce cutting-edge material due to the fact that he distributed it through the mail instead of more traditional methods. But his pinup work with Bettie Page still ended up causing some serious controversy when it came into the hands of a politician. Irving was taken to court over his distribution of BDSM-related pornography. There were no legal consequences, but the ordeal damaged his reputation. It also damaged the reputation of Bettie Page. After the court proceedings came to an end, so did Bettie's professional relationship with Irving. However, she still had some of her most iconic pinup work ahead of her. She took up with a former pinup model named Bunny Yeager. Bunny was now a photographer, and she photographed some of Bettie's most iconic pinups. By the end of the 50s, Bettie had undergone a religious awakening and no longer wanted to take part in the entertainment industry. She left the public spotlight, and little was heard from her over the ensuing decades. She had some mental issues and was locked up in an asylum for a short period of time. By the 1990s, the world was so anxious to know what had happened to Bettie Page that Penthouse magazine offered a cash reward for anyone who knew what she was up to. Before the end of her life, Bettie returned to the public spotlight and reflected upon the impact she'd had on the industry of pornography. Despite the religious awakening she underwent in the 1950s, she came to terms with her work in pinups before her death. Eartha Kitt. Many audiences may first think of the 1960s Batman series when they hear the name Eartha Kitt. But before playing Catwoman on that classic live-action TV show, Eartha Kitt was a stunning pinup model. She actually came from a cabaret background and was best known as a dancer over the course of her career. Legendary filmmaker Orson Welles was particularly infatuated with her. Rita Hayworth. Pinup models came about largely as the result of World War II. Lonely soldiers in the war needed reminders of the feminine form, and pinups proved the perfect medium. Amongst all the models that graced pinups during the war, Rita Hayworth was the second most popular. She also took part in USO shows, giving the soldiers a chance to experience what she was like in a more personalized setting. Betty Grable. Betty was the first most popular pinup model in World War II. In addition to being pinup models, Rita Hayworth and Betty were also notable starlets on the screen during Hollywood's golden age. At the peak of Betty's success, she was the highest paid woman in the entirety of America. Diana Dors. Diana Dors was a pinup model who many considered to be the British version of Marilyn Monroe. These two models had decidedly similar features, though Marilyn ended up being the one who went on to more fame. Still, Diana Dors was quite the looker during her pinup days. If Diana Dors was the British version of Marilyn Monroe, Cleo Moore was known as the blonde version of Rita Hayworth. Given Cleo's good looks, it's no surprise the pinup model ended up finding great success. But success in the pinup industry wasn't enough for her. Once she realized there was no chance of being taken seriously in the entertainment industry due to her pinup past, she decided to leave the industry behind. During her later life, she started up a successful career as a real estate investor. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know Eartha Kitt was a pinup model before playing Catwoman, and that Marilyn Monroe was a pinup model before she was a Hollywood star? Which of these pinup models is your favorite? Let us know in the comments section below.